Okay, we are live. Happy New Year. Welcome, everybody. This is the second to last panel of the day. If you're joining for this panel is the first one of our indie author fantasy kickoff blitz here on YouTube. You can go watch the replays of all the others today. We've had 4 so far, over 16 authors across them. And we have more panels coming over the weekend to talk about indie writing, indie publishing, in fantasy, but specifically for this panel, urban fantasy books with an amazing panel of authors who I have never met like face to face until right now, even though I've seen some of you, and it's such an honor to meet you. We have Jenna S. Brown, we have Tora Ray, we have Caitlin, and I hope I don't butcher your last name, Caitlin Legaspi.
Yes.
And Emily. Hey. So, because we're all new, sort of to each other and to the viewers, why don't we go around and introduce ourselves and a little bit about what we write? Jenna, would you like to start us off?
Yep, I can totally do that. I'm Janet Brown. I am also Jenna Ray, and I'm also Jadlyn Asher because I have pen name issues. I like writing in multiple genres, and at a certain point, you have to start separating people because there's too much chocolate in your peanut butter kind of things that go on, and at that point everybody needs their own little thing. But I've been working in publishing for almost 30 years. I started back as a teenager. I'm a professional editor, an author coach. I teach people about how to write fiction and how to get their fiction published. And when I'm not doing that, I'm writing. I just put my 16th book out across the 3 pen names, and I'm really excited to be here. So, woohoo!
That's awesome. We're going to have to come back to the pen name because there was a question that came up on one of the earlier panels about when and why you would use a different pen name and whether that'd be a good idea. So we'll come back to that later on. But I just love meeting all the different authors from all different stages of the journey, like brand new to veteran writers who are coaching other writers. And
Authors
glad to
are the
have
best
you.
people. They just are. It just comes with the creative vibe. They are the best people.
Not that I'm biased at all, but
No, not even a little bit. Never
Tora,
biased.
welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am what I call a genre bending author because I write genre bending fantasy and sci-fi. In my epic fantasy, you also get an alien invasion and a little bit of urban fantasy tropes with shapeshifters. My newest series is in urban fantasy, and I also write nonfiction, wherever it is in my screen, for writers, and I also call myself an indie author biz guide. So I'm working with authors as well, and mostly their business because I used to be a CPA. So I'm helping them with getting their businesses where they need to be for success.
Oh, nice. A lot of expertise in this panel today. And Caitlin, I cannot tell you how overdue it is to finally chat with you face to face. I joined Instagram in November 2020, so 2 years ago, and Caitlin was one of the first people whose stuff I came across before I'd ever put a book out. And I've just been following you ever since. So it's so surreal to actually chat with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Man, it's really been that long. But yeah, my name is Caitlin Legaspi. Clearly, I write urban fantasy. I actually started out writing fantasy. I've been writing since middle school, so it's been about 10 years now. I'm getting lost. Fun fact, I just graduated from college earlier this year. And woo, it's over. And I'm working on putting out the 3rd book of my card holder series. It's projected to come out in June next year, and that would be the 5th book the 6th one. I can count. The 6th one that I've been publishing. But yeah, super excited for that.
Yes, so exciting. Congrats on finishing college and being free.
Thank you.
Was your major writing related major?
No, I was actually a business management major with a minor in
Oh,
communication
nice.
studies. Yeah.
That might be more helpful since the marketing side seems to be the hardest.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah, for sure. And like now that I've had all those different classes, you just like look at things differently, and it's just been a bit eye-opening. It's a good way to think, I guess, in this realm. Just to have
Yeah.
a bit more of the creative side paired with a business sense.
Hmm.
So it's been good.
Yeah. And hey, Luna. Hey, Asylum Writers. Good to see you all on. Emily, you're one of the most recent friends that I've made in the writer community. And you've got beautiful books, beautiful social media. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you. I am pretty new to publishing. I have been writing for a really long time. I guess that's a little incorrect. So I was writing short stories for a couple of years and selling them off to magazines. When I discovered that that was a market, I just kind of got obsessed with all these submission calls, and it was really fun for a while. And then, of course, you realize this isn't something I can do as a career, and I wanted to be going back to writing novels anyway. So that's when I dipped into looking at indie publishing. So I write sarcastic moms who solve supernatural or paranormal mysteries because I am a mom of two littles and I want to see a mother who gets to be witty and the chosen one because I feel like in often, main media, moms are portrayed as like stressed out and frantic and or like the sacrificial one who dies early on. I'm like, nope. I want her to be the kick-ass one who is funny and gets all those cool lines too. So those are kind of where my books are. Death of a Fairy Tale is the one that jump started that whole thing. And I'm also starting a new series, which is going to be more cozy paranormal mystery side, but same deal. Sarcastic mom solving supernatural mysteries. So yeah, I've been having a great time. It's almost a year since Death of a Fairy Tale came out, so that'll be my anniversary of indie publishing in January.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yay.
The time really flies once the first book is out. It's like,
Mhm.
where did it go?
Hmm.
Yes. Um, oh, thank you all. And if you're watching live, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We will be answering them as we go through. And if you're watching the replay, you can leave questions in the comments and I will get those to the authors later on because we love your questions, whether you're a reader or a fellow writer. And that goes back to that point I was just making to Jana about how do you know when to do a pen name, because one of the topics that came up is we've been writing in one genre and then all of a sudden you have a very clear difference, like going from fantasy to contemporary romance, I think was this one. When do you know you need a separate pen name and when is it okay to try to make it all work under the one name?
Well, what it comes down to is that our pen names are about branding. And we want to be the authors that when somebody sees your pen name, they know exactly what you write. So if you say Stephen King, we know exactly what he writes because he's built his author brand around the particular type of horror that he writes. And even when he delves into science fiction, fantasy, and that kind of stuff, it always has that same horrific bent. It's always
Mhm.
there. And that is his name is that brand. And the problem that you get when you say, well, my name is going to be a brand where I'm going to have nonfiction and contemporary romance and science fiction romance and fantasy and urban fantasy, all of which I've written, people get confused because if they're looking for my nonfiction, how do they find me? And if they have to dig through all of these other books in order to find the one nonfiction that they want, that's confusing. So anytime that we're going to confuse a reader, then we need to split off and have a pen name. And yes, having pen names is more work. It totally is because you need to run the brand for each of those pen names. So you do want to think about it before you do it to go, am I willing to run a brand? Am I willing to produce work for each of those pen names and to keep them up? But if you're going to write, especially multi-genre where it's significantly far apart, it becomes really necessary. I know some people say, well, for every little difference, you need a different one. I was talking to a gal, poor thing. She's in romance and she has 17 different pen names. It's because every time she went to, well, small town is its own pen name, and this is its own pen name, and this is its own pen name. And she was absolutely losing her mind. And I felt so bad for her because 17 was way too many. So
Mhm.
I usually tell people somewhere between about 1 and 4 unless you've got a whole team of VAs and other people who can help you manage all the brands, because it gets overwhelming. But, this is because my epic fantasy, my urban fantasy, and that kind of stuff has very light romance in it. And I started writing those because A, I love them, and B, I have sons who are military fanatics, who love fantasy, and we're going to go through and mow down all the bad guys and the blood and the guts and my sweet romance readers didn't want to read those books and got really confused when they were all under the same brand. So I broke it out to where now I have one where my romance sits over here and it's contemporary romance. It's very sweet. It's all that kind of stuff. And my big action adventure pieces that might have a little bit of romance, but are mostly really focused on action adventure magic, they sit over here. And that way we don't get confusion. I get some crossover, but mostly my audience wants what they want. And so it's nonfiction, romance, and action adventure fantasy. Science fiction, speculative stuff.
Yeah. Now, Caitlin, I don't remember if it was this year or the year before. Now it's all muddled because it's been crazy. You did a rebrand of your author social media.
Yeah, because my old account, I don't even remember what it's called anymore. No, it was Caitlin.b.Legaspi. And because that old account had died off, and there were things that I had done with that account to gain followers that I didn't agree with, like a year or two out after making it. So I decided to start fresh because I knew the people who wanted to engage with me would come over to my new account, and they did, and I was really happy about it. And yeah, since then I've been doing more of the content that I've wanted to do, less of the things that I did to gain followers, which is fine with me. I have a much smaller following than I did on the old account, but I'd rather have an engaged, I guess, loyal following than dead numbers, basically. But it's been a lot of fun, and I can't believe it's been a year since then. I started that account December 26th, 2021.
Oh,
And then,
wow.
oh, shoot, I missed its birthday. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, it was also, the timing with that was also kind of awkward because Two More Lives was coming out, and I'd already, I believe, started promotion for that. So it was really, when should I do this? But I would rather have done the promotion, my thinking at the time, with a smaller group of more engaged followers than just a ton of people who are ghost followers.
Absolutely.
So that's why I made the move at that time, about 3 months before it came out.
Yeah. And if you're watching and you've been wondering where Caitlin went, you didn't catch the shift, all of the links for all of the authors that you see on this panel are in the description box on YouTube. So you can just scroll down and click the links. If you are not watching on YouTube, you're watching on Twitter, you'll have to either jump over to my YouTube to grab them, or you can look up the authors on their social medias. They're very easy to find, and connect with them there. But I think that's a really great point, just about the genuine engagement, knowing your audience, knowing your readers. And we won't get too bogged down into the technical writer aspect today, but if you're watching the replay, the person who asked earlier about the pin names, I think that's great advice, is having the clearly defined brands, that this brand is the one that's going to do this and this is what's going to do that. And this year too, one of the things that I really learned was figuring out where my love was for writing, because I had, this time last year doing the Blitz, I had Portal Fantasy, I had grim dark vampire apocalypse fantasy, I had an epic fantasy with clean romance, I had a dark fantasy romance. It was all mixed together under that umbrella name. And this year I've had to figure out, where's my love? What do I want to keep writing at this point in my journey? What do I want this name to be known for? And then down the line, maybe introduce some of that stuff back. So it's good to know that you're not alone out there when you're looking through this stuff. So let's see, Emily, you said that you're a mom. How do you find time to write and work and mom?
Oh man, that is a loaded question. So I also homeschool my kids, and it's basically every morning I start with my planner out, like, okay, what am I going to get done today? I on the writing aspect side of it, I'm kind of a binge writer, which I'm also a binge reader. So I kind of think about the book for a really long time and maybe get a little bit of outlining done here and there. And that can happen anywhere, right? On my phone, when I'm sitting next to my kids watching TV, anything like that. And then I tend to binge write it within like 3 weeks. And it's chaos. And it's kind of, I think my kids have almost gotten used to this routine that 3 weeks. They're kind of entertaining themselves. They're, like I come out of my writing hole to make them lunch and everything. They're not old enough quite to do all those things yet. But I actually get a lot of writing done at the park. My life changed when I finally got a laptop, and I go to a park for hours, and my kids will play and socialize, and I get to sit there and write. Unfortunately, it's been a little too cold and wet lately to do that, but I actually try to do that year round because I'm in California and most of the weather is pretty good. So that's been my secret. Get my kids outside, get my writing done. And I find nature and just being outside in the sun and fresh air is really good for my writing anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I found the same thing as I'm in Utah right now. I used to live in Southern California. But in the summer times, I love taking my laptop up into the canyon where it's cooler and writing. And I just get so much more done when I'm outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I hate it when it's winter. And I
Okay,
can't
but
go
which
outside.
canyon do you go up? Because that way I can bring my laptop and we can hang out together on our own laptops, not speaking to each other because we're busy writing.
Oh, I'd love that. I go up to Cedar Canyon because I'm in southern Utah.
Okay,
So I'm near
you're far away,
Zion's.
but when I visit my in-laws, then we can do a whole thing because I'm up by Salt Lake, so my
Oh,
canyons
okay.
are different
New
kinds of
Yeah, I
Year's
have
canyon.
Blitz. Authors
my niece.
Connection.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have a niece and a nephew that live up in Salt Lake. So,
Well, see,
so there's a
we'll make a thing happen. It'd be cool, and everybody else can also
yeah.
come to Utah. We're happy to share. We'll blitz together.
Wait, where do you
Yeah.
sit in the canyon? That's what I want to know.
There's the canyon that I go to. There's like a little park,
Oh,
and
okay.
so there's a pavilion that's covered that has picnic benches. So I've been up there when it's rained, and it's just been lovely. And if I stay like in the evening, I'll see some deer come down and stuff. So it's one of my favorite places to write. Or if I don't go there, there's a little park nearby that I love writing outside. There's just something that happens to your creativity that doesn't happen when you're sitting inside, at least for me.
See, when you said canyon, I was imagining that you had strapped yourself on a harness with the laptop on a harness, and it was like, if you don't write this many words, the laptop's going to fall down. So, high stakes writing right there.
There's a scene for a book.
So Luna asked what drew you to the writing scene, and I guarantee you it was not dangling from a canyon laptop. So what drew you to the writing scene, Jana?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm one of these people that grew up reading and reading a whole lot. And by the time that I was 8, I knew that the two things that I wanted out of my life is I wanted to write books and I wanted to be a mom. And I liked that those two things could go together because writing is a thing I can do while momming when the children are asleep, when they're at the park, when they're now they're starting to grow up and I have grandchildren and it's the same kind of thing of, oh, he's so cute and asleep and now I can type. So I always wanted to do that. And that's where my education went. I graduated in editing and publication. So it was all focused on that kind of thing. And then most of the jobs that I've done have been writing related, lots and lots of technical writing, which is lots of fun. And then the other side, the creative writing and the editing. So I'm one of those that it's what I always wanted.
How about you, Emily?
I think I got a diary when I was like 6 years old, and I just wanted to fill up the pages with stuff. So I literally write what I ate for dinner every single night, and I kept that up for probably 10 years. I write what I ate for dinner every single day, and I would add other things once I started to learn how to actually write better. And then I don't know when in that time frame I was like, I want to actually write stories, not just these random little parts about my day. So it's just been around for a very long time for me. It started with this like, okay, this is a blank page. I want to fill this up. I want to use this little diary I got. And then I think it was, the Lord of the Rings movies came out when I was like a preteen. And of course, I was just obsessed with fantasy from there on out, and I wanted to create. So,
Yes. So you're one of the authors that can actually write in the pretty journal.
yeah, actually, I used to do all of my drafts handwritten. I don't do that
Wow.
anymore because I'm like on this publishing schedule. It's like, okay, I need to do it a little bit quicker. But I will definitely go back to it at some point to do at least enjoyable writing in the notebooks.
How about you, Tora? What brought you to writing?
Like most others, I've been a reader for small. I can remember one of my first stories I wrote in elementary school. I don't have it, but I still remember it. So I've always been writing. When I went to college, unfortunately, I went into accounting, which does not the same brain. But even then, I continued writing and always have been writing. And I like writing both the fiction and the nonfiction. There's just a different type of creativity there. And then I got to the point where accounting was like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. And that's when I returned to really focusing on my writing. Before that, like living in Southern California with the traffic, I would take my laptop to work with me and then find a Starbucks on the road, like halfway home, and sit at Starbucks and write while I waited for traffic to die down. So I've always continued writing, but really focused on it once indie publishing came out. It's like I tried to do the traditional route and rejections just kill my writing. So I was like, nope, not for me. And then when indie publishing came out, it was like, oh, yes. And then I just dove into it and learned everything I could about it. Published my first book in 2016.
That's amazing. Wow. So from corporate to publishing world, and now you're a publishing guru.
I'm trying to be.
Caitlin, you published your first book as a young author. So
Yeah.
what brought you into the writing scene, especially so young?
Yeah, so like everyone else, I was such a big reader. I actually started out hating reading while I was learning how to read. My parents taught me and all of my siblings how to read and do basic math before we went to kindergarten, so that was kind of intense. But after all the teaching was over, I absolutely fell in love with reading. And my whole story is so Nickelodeon used to have the message boards on their website. So I started out writing fan fiction. My first fan fiction was Power Rangers Samurai. Loved it. And I found this whole other section of original stories. And I was like, oh, I can do that. And I was like, all these kids my age making their own stories. I want to do that too. So I started Dark Irregular, which is actually currently under heavy rewrite. My first novel that I'd ever written, the first novel I'd ever published, started out as a Nickelodeon original story. And then my friend in middle school at the time, he said, well, do you think you're ever going to get it published? And I thought about it. And I was like, oh, that's a thing that I can do. So I stopped posting the chapters and I was getting stuck on it anyway. To the message boards, I restarted it from scratch, and that's just where it went. It used to be traditionally published back when I was in high school, but I didn't know a thing about marketing. I didn't have the time for it anyway. I was an IB student. So I took a break from that until my sophomore year, I believe, in college. I revisited everything, and that's when I started my self-publishing journey.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because a lot of authors feel like once you get traditionally published, it's the golden egg. All the work's done for you, and you're just going to make money. And I've learned in the last couple of years that a lot of the marketing is about the same, whether you self-pub or traditional. Like you get open doors that you might not have, for sure, and both have their pros. But there's still a lot of marketing work to be done if you're traditional.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember having so many, what was it, like pages of press releases that I never used, but and they're probably we either threw them away a long time ago, but they're sitting in some corner of my parents' house gathering dust. But yeah, because I didn't know anything about marketing, it
Mm.
never really took off until I self-published. But yeah. But now
Yeah.
I'm rewriting the entire trilogy, so I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But yeah, it's way overdue for a makeover because I wrote that thing when I was in middle school and first year high school.
Wow.
So I get a chance to make it what I want it to, and what I envisioned. But
That's
yeah,
really exciting. Congratulations.
thank you.
So, speaking of writing, we're going to segue into that. And since you were already talking, Caitlin, I'll let you go first and then we'll circle around. What is in the works for 2023? Writing, editing, publishing, what's going on?
Quite a lot, actually. I used to be a writer who would only work at one thing at a time, but then um, I got stuck on one of my contemporary romance pieces, something that I just recently got into. So I was like, okay, well, let's take a break from this. And since I've been wanting to rewrite my trilogy for such a long time, let's start on it. Now I'm working on both of those at the same time. And currently, my boyfriend's my editor. We're working on the blurb for book 3 right now. And then he'll be starting edits for book 4 in either January or February or so. Well, I guess tomorrow or next the month after, since it's their 31st. But yeah, so there's that too. I'm also working on world building for another, which is going really slowly. But yeah, and I got my first book signing in March too. Just a little segue
Wow.
outside of writing, but yeah, it's a lot of writing and editing going on. It just doesn't stop.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, Emily, what's coming in 2023?
All right, so the Mari Fable Mysteries, which is where Death of a Fairy Tale starts, that's the first book of that series, is getting book 5 out in 2023. So I have the first 4 books released this year, book 5 coming out next year, and then the first 3 books will be released month after month in October, November, December next year for the Bewitcher's Beach Cozy Paranormal Mystery series. And again, those both kind of overlap with sarcastic, funny moms solving supernatural or paranormal mysteries. So there's always going to be a supernatural underworld in these. The Mari Fable Mysteries obviously has a mystery aspect as well, and they both involve lots of fun werewolves, vampires, all the urban fantasy creatures.
Nice. So, I'm going to come back to you for a second on that in just a minute because we got a question on social that'll actually fit into that. Tora, what do you have in the works for 2023?
Well, I also tend to work on lots of projects at the same time. So I'm finishing doing the rewrites for book 2 in my Sentinel Witches series, which is set in Southern California, and it's about witches fighting demons. And there's a different demon that comes through every book, and there's a different goddess that helps the main character, Catelyn, um, and her sidekick, Sean. Um, and they have different things to do. Like book 2, he gets kidnapped, and she has to rescue him from the demon world. And that's kind of following the story of Inanna's journey to the underworld. Got book 3 started, and I'm working on the prequel story that's about how Catelyn's powers were bound, because at the beginning of Crossroads to Destiny, she doesn't know she's a witch and she doesn't know she has powers. And then she starts seeing these strange creatures and like, what the hell's going on? Um, so that's what I'm working on the fiction side, and then I'm working on um, business planning for authors book. I have beta read. I'm making the changes on that, and I do a podcast. So I've got lots of things going on.
A lot. A lot. A podcast is a lot of work too to throw in
Yeah,
on top of writing and editing and publishing and revising.
yeah. So the
Um,
podcast is on business of author, the business of being a independent author.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really so helpful. There's so many people who would love to put their book out in the world, and there are so many
Mm-hmm.
people waiting, wanting to take your money to tell you
Mm-hmm.
basics that you could find with a little bit of research, but it's hidden so well. I know when I struggled with starting this author journey, that's what made me start this YouTube channel, was
Mm-hmm.
so that people could see what I was finding as I was finding it, and stuff I'm still finding
Yeah.
as an author.
Yeah, and as an indie author, you have a business. You might as well
Mm.
learn how to run it.
Mm-hmm. Jenna, what's coming up in 2023? What do you have
Oh,
on your very busy agenda?
I have a big plate, and all the things are falling off the edges of it because there's a lot coming up. I have It'll probably be 6 books, hopefully, going out this year. So the second book in the Sentinels of Essence should go out. The first book in the Diana McDonough files should go out if everything goes well there. And then the third book in the War of the Lich, which closes off that trilogy, will go out. Then I have a nonfiction on self-editing for authors to make it so that when you get to an editor, you're at a point that you're going to get a really good edit because you've already taken out a lot of the fluff by yourself, and that way you get a much better edit from your editor. And then I've got a contemporary romance, or 2, something like that. So that's going out in the book world. With the company I work with, we're launching a new fiction course in January, so we're finishing all of the recording for that. And then I'm teaching or attending. So I'm attending Superstars. I'm teaching at Life, the Universe, and Everything. I'll probably also teach at Quills and FireCon, so I'll be at some conventions. And when I'm not doing that, then I also have a podcast. I co-host the Publishing by the Numbers podcast. So I'm always doing something, but we'll see if it all gets done by next year.
Yes, it's a lot. That's a lot, but a lot of exciting things. Like, I'm curious, and we'll just make this really short, and then we'll move on to the other questions from the social media. If you're watching on YouTube, you can drop them in the chat, and I can pull them on the screen. If you're watching on Twitter, you'll have to just put them in the regular comments, and I'll pluck them off there. Um, how many of you have figured out how the cycle works yet? Because this is something I'm trying to implement in 2023, where you have one book you're drafting, one book you're editing, one book you're prepping for publication. Are any of you guys doing that currently?
Oh, have to. There's no other way to get multiple books out. You've got to be able to. I mean, I guess some people can who write really, really fast. I don't write fast enough to not have things going on where they're in different stages. Otherwise, I'd only get one book out a year.
So in my case, since I wrote a lot of books before I even started publishing them, I'm good for a few years, and I don't put multiple books out a year, so it's one a year for me, so it's fine. But yeah, until then, until I run out of books to publish, where I won't be able to keep up with my writing, the cycle of having one book being written, having one being edited, and one being published, which is where I'm about at right now, it will go on great for about the next 6 years or so. So yeah, I have it all planned out in this brain of mine.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why you have multiple projects and books that you're working on, because they're always a different stage. And even when you're doing your self-editing and you're rewriting, sometimes it's really good to set that aside for a little while and come back to it so you're more fresh and seeing things that you would miss otherwise. So it's always good to have something else that you're writing on, or another project that you're working on, so that you're still continuing that forward movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I experienced that about twice in the past few years. The first one actually was in college. I took like a 4-month hiatus because I have the whole cardholder series written, has been finished since like junior year of college. Back when book 4 I thought was a hot mess, I ended up splitting that into 2, and now those halves are their own books. I just filled in the gaps between, and I took a 4-month hiatus because it just wasn't working out.
Mm-hmm.
Then at that time I was still doing fan fiction on a on a site. So that was my writing project on the side. But it took 4 months for me to take a break and then get back to it and see, oh, this is what's needed. And it was the same thing with my contemporary romance piece. When I took a break from it, started rewriting Dark Irregular, just gave my mind a break. And then I went back to it where I am in the story, and I got to write a completely different, I guess, series of events that led up to a completely different ending that I hadn't originally planned out. And I liked it so much better. And in my brain, it seems to have flowed so much better. And right now, as I'm writing it, it's flowing a lot better. So let's hope it continues down that path. But yeah, it just really reminds me how important it is to give yourself a break sometimes, which is something I didn't start until this year. So yeah,
Yeah.
be kind. Be kind to your brain. Be kind to yourself.
Show yourself the kindness you would share other people. Share with other people.
Yeah. Even when you're writing full time, you're not writing 8 hours a day. You know, you're doing a lot of other things. You're doing your marketing, you're doing your research on marketing, you're doing, you know, your bookkeeping or whatever. So you're not writing 8 hours a day. And I think especially new people who are coming into it, it's like, oh, I'm not an author, I'm not writing 8 hours. And it's like, no author can do that. You know, our hands would die, even if you're dictating, your voice would give out. You know, you have this creative flow and this cycle. So give yourself that grace to find what your cycle and your flow is.
Yeah, even binge writers, like Emily said, I'm a binge writer too. If the books, plural, don't get written during NaNoWriMo, they will not be written. I'm a full-time editor, and I have trouble just balancing, editing other people's books, reviewing other people's books, doing the YouTube channel, writing and publishing my own books. And November is like the month I'm dead to the world. I don't exist in November. I'll be writing 3 or 4 books in November, and that's all that I'll be doing. See you all later. But even then, it's like every couple hours, I'm like, all right, I got to get up. I got to stretch. I got to go get a snack that I shouldn't be eating, whatever it is. And then I've got 2 littles, and they're like, you're going to get up and get us a snack, even if you don't want one.
I love that you mentioned NaNoWriMo, because that's kind of, I think, what got me in the binge mindset. I used to write for NaNoWriMo way before I was publishing. I also wrote a bunch of books before I even came into publishing, and it was because of NaNoWriMo. I'd be like, okay, let's write as fast as I can, and now I still like that. But as we're talking about cycles, I actually finally have planned this next year, 2023, I'm going to be on a much better cycle where I still will be binge writing because I kind of like that. But then I'm going to give the book a longer rest period than I did last year. And it gets more time with critique readers and stuff, just so that I can not stress. Exactly. And it can be better, healthier experience for me.
Yeah. So Emily, I mentioned I was coming back to you about the fantasy type creatures in the urban fantasy. And one of the questions that we have is urban fantasy just about the setting? Otherwise, what makes it different from something like paranormal romance?
So this is actually something in going back really quick to pen names. I made the huge mistake this year of actually publishing 2 romances that were contemporary romances with slight fantasy elements. And in my head, I was like, oh, these are urban fantasies. And I'm like, wait, no. These are set in a small town. This is this is the opposite of urban here. So I definitely take the urban part seriously. This is going to be in a city setting where there's going to be a lot of people around. There's probably a nightlife, and it's a busy place. So that's how my Mari Fable mysteries are set in San Francisco, big busy city, and then the fantasy side of it tends to go toward that supernatural. I think the vampires, the werewolves, which of course can be in paranormal too, but I think paranormal can be set in all different places. Whereas the urban, you've got that word in there, you're expecting a cityscape.
Yeah.
And I think too with urban fantasy, even if you have some romance, because I do have romance, but the romance is not a plot. It's not the main. if you take the romance out of the story still stands on its own.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of one of the areas of difference between paranormal romance and urban fantasy is you've got this story set in an urban contemporary setting, and you have all this magic and mystical creatures. There's going to be dragons in mine. They're coming up, and unicorns, and I always have a shapeshifter. But that's what kind of makes it urban with some of those tropes. But where you cross over to paranormal is when the romance takes center stage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
a big deal to readers. I've
Yes.
spent a phenomenal amount of time on reader groups listening to them talk about what they want. And when even people who read both urban fantasy and paranormal romance, they want that distinct line that says the urban fantasy is more about what is going on with that paranormal world. There's usually kind of a mystery involved. There's all those things happening. And how does the real world interact with that, or doesn't it? All that kind of thing. And again, if it's got a little romance to it, no big deal. They like that. But when you make that crossover to paranormal romance, you're really looking at a romance story that may or may not have any of those things that they want, because it's focused on the romance, and that's what your romance readers want. And so people sometimes mislabel them trying to get a bigger audience. And it goes back to that branding of, we want it labeled to what the readers want, because when we make that right connection to our right market, that's where we make a lot of success and we gain a lot of readers, versus the ones that start reading it and they go, wait, we're 3 sex scenes in and there still hasn't been anything plotty about this thing. This isn't an urban fantasy. I mean, there's a group out there that's called All Slain in No Lane, where they want stories that have very low romance because they really want urban fantasies, not paranormal romances. And there's paranormals where they're like, don't confuse it with all of that other stuff. Give us the sex, give us the relationships. Let's give the people what they want, but label it appropriately.
Yeah. If you're watching and you're like, I'm here for the paranormal romance, I'm in the wrong place. Don't worry, there's no judgment here. There is
they're
a
all great.
paranormal romance panel tomorrow. So you can come back and watch the paranormal romance panel and meet some of those authors. But I think it's not just urban fantasy.
Romance. Yeah. And having a romance or having relationships in your story, no matter what it is part of life. And I include that in all of my stories, but I don't label mine as romance because they aren't front and center. They're part of the story. They're part of the person's life. Whereas a romance, if you took the romance part out of it, you don't have a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's all great. It's just, we want to make sure readers get what they want. So I have a paranormal romance that will come out at some point under the pen name, because it's romance first and foremost. And so it's just about, we want to connect with our readers, because that's how you get the best followers, is when you're providing what they really want.
Right. And Caitlin, how about you for your books and the romance?
Oh, shoot. Okay. So, fun fact, my romance books thing, there's going to be 6 books, 3 duologies, all under the same series. I don't know why I decided it that way, but I did. But the unique thing about them is that they're actually all spin-offs after the end of the Cardholder series.
Wow.
So there are going to be a lot of the urban fantasy elements that are present in Cardholders, but it's definitely, like, I know my stories are definitely more character driven and relationship driven. There's a lot of action in it, but really the characters and the relationships are at the center of it, especially the main character. But this is very much solely revolving around the relationships. If there's action in it, it's there because something's happening in their world and they have to do it. But it's not the main focus of it at all. Like, in all of the drafts that I've written for my romance series, there's maybe only 1 to 2 action scenes per book, and it's not even a full-fledged fight with a monster, for example. So that's just why I'm categorizing them as, I guess, more contemporary romance as opposed to urban fantasy because there's such a big distinction and just that much more of a focus on relationships than the world itself. Yeah.
Yeah, great
Yep.
distinctions. So we're going to talk a minute about if you had one special thing that you could share with the people watching who are interested in urban fantasy books in 2023, what would that one special thing be that you have in the coming year? Emily, why don't you start?
So hard to choose one. So I think I'm going to go with the Death of a Fairy Tale audiobook that's going to be coming out. I'm very excited about this because I listen to audiobooks. That is kind of how I do my reading as a mom because I'm always on the move. And when I'm sitting down, that's when I need to be writing. So I've got my earbuds in, I'm on a walk, I'm at the park, whatever it is, in the car. I finally get to read. So now I'm giving that experience to my readers. And my main character, Mari Fable, has a really funny, sarcastic, just fun voice. So I cannot wait for it to actually be audible.
Yay!
Hey.
Very exciting. Jenna, what do you have coming? What is the one thing you want people to be on the lookout for in 2023?
Oh, besides all of them, I think my very favorite thing that should go out is Ask Me No Questions, which is the first Diana McDonough book. I am an old school geek who started playing Dungeons and Dragons back in the 1980s, and I found World of
Yay!
Darkness in the 90s and loved it. Absolutely loved playing in the paranormal world, and that's where this character came from. I played her on a mush for years, and she kept poking in the back of my brain to say, I need to be in books. And so I've started writing her stuff, and she is so much fun because she is a grown-up, y'all. She is not a 19-year-old discovering her power for the first time. She is nearly 40, and she has had enough of everybody's crap, and is taking on the paranormal world in her own special I am a grown-up way. And I kind of like that because now I'm on that side of 40, and I still love reading the paranormal about these people who are coming into their power, but I also started looking around and going, where are the grown-ups? I want to read about somebody who has had a little bit of life experience and who looks at some of this and goes, oh, you are all such infants, why are you doing this? So because I couldn't find it, I started writing it, and so I'm doing that. A lot of my paranormal has those characters that are not in their 20s anymore and that have some life experience. So I'm really excited to get her out to the world because she is sarcastic and funny and moms people whether they want it or not, and then kicks ass and takes names. So I'm thrilled to get her out into the public.
See, now this makes me want a Giles spinoff from Buffy about
It would be awesome.
Yeah.
what he does as a watcher.
And they can just call it oh my and have him cleaning his glasses because that was his thing. If he said oh my, it meant that there was something bad and they needed to pay attention.
It's like I can't even with you guys.
And I think having older characters is what a lot of people are looking for. And I know, especially for myself, I don't read young adult because I didn't like my teenage years. I don't want to relive my teenage years. And so I'm really appreciating these books now that are coming out with the older characters. And I like reading them because I'm way past 40. And I appreciate those older, more mature characters.
So I know this is sort of tied in. It's more portal, urban, magical fantasy. But Nicole Wells, who's an indie author, who was going to make an appearance this weekend, but had something else come up, wrote a book this year called Midlife Magic School.
Yeah.
And I read it, and it was amazing. And I'm not in that age range, but it was still an amazing book, and it left a lot for thought. So I'll leave that in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. But Nicole Wells' Midlife Magic School is basically a woman who finds out she's got magical powers once her kids are off to college. It's just great.
Life does not end when you're 30.
Right. So, yeah. But Tara, if you have one thing that you could shout out for this coming year, what would it be?
I'm looking to get book 2 of the Sentinel Witches out, which is Descent into Darkness. And my characters are older. They are, they're in their late 20s, early 30s. Sean's been a police detective for quite a while, so he's in his mid 30s. And one of my main characters is his grandmother, and she's in her 70s, and she still kicks demon butt.
Yes.
And she rides a flying cat.
Oh.
A key sheet. So I have some fun things in it, and I love this second book in the series where she is the rescuer and not having to be rescued. I like that switch and that flip. And some other interesting fun things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very
that's what
exciting.
I'm looking forward to finishing. It's like just going through some beta comments and
So close.
critique comments, and it's like, oh, so close.
All right. So, Caitlin, last but definitely not least, what is one thing that you've got going in 2023 that you really think everybody should follow?
I already mentioned book 3 coming out in June. But another thing that I've got going is you've probably seen my blooper reels of this on Instagram. I have the I Can Talk audiobook of Red Blood, the first book of the Cardholder series, hopefully coming out in February. I have a few more chapters to record, starting tomorrow, I guess. But yeah, so I've a huge risk narrating it myself, but it's been a ton of fun, and it's been a ton of fun making the blooper reels for it. My favorite line is singular grain of fried rice. But yeah, it's that will hopefully be coming out in February. Thankfully, I'm not editing it myself. My sound engineer friend is.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I'm liking how it's sounding so far, and I'm thankful to hear that I'm improving with each chapter that I read. So yeah, that's one thing that's coming out in 2023.
The introvert's worst nightmare is having somebody, I say this from my experience, having somebody listen to me read my own book is so scary to me.
Listening to my own voice is kind of cringy to me, honestly. But I
But
mean,
we do it for the love of the readers.
we do it for the love of the readers, yeah.
Well, this has been so awesome. I'm so excited that we got to
Wait,
spend.
Katherine, what are you doing?
What am I doing?
Yeah.
You've asked all of us and all those kinds of things. You're also doing cool stuff. Please share with us the awesome things that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm actually not doing anything urban really this year for sure. I've got one grimdark fantasy that has an urban setting, but it's sort of my last thing because I'm doing a rapid release of 5 full-length books in 5 months starting January 17th, and that's a dark mythological epic fantasy. The Oracle of Life is the first volume, and it's 99 cents while it's on pre-order. So that's really the biggest thing I have going right now. And then the next ones will come out February, March, April, and May. And the rest of the year, I'm going to have to see how much energy I have left for anything, because I would like to finish up the Vampire Apocalypse book and also, or series, it would be a duology. So the second one there, and finish up the Splitting World series with the second novel there. But this year has been so hectic, launching a Realm of Darkness box set with a great group of people, which was a lot more work than I ever imagined. That next year is my big publishing push year, so we'll see how it goes. But thank you all so much again just for spending your New Year's Eve with all of us. I'm really so excited to have met all of you. And again, if you want to connect with any of these authors, see their books, please check out the links in the description box. We have, let's see, this is panel number 5. So we have over 10 more panels over the next 2 days. There's going to be a total of 16 panels the first 3 days of this week. including today, and a total of over 60 authors. So
Nice.
come
Go
back in,
do.
subscribe, and get a notification when we do our next one, which will be Young Adult Epic Fantasy in about half an hour. So
You need to
thank
give
you.
yourself
So
a break
thank
after
you for
this.
having us.
Oh,
Oh,
this
thank
is
you.
the
Thank
fun
you.
part. Thank you all
Thank you
so
for
much.
having
Happy
us.
New
This was
Thank
Year.
so
you so
fun. Thank you.
much. Happy New Year.